Hi, welcome, Mr. Dresen. How are you?
Hello, hello. I'm just sitting in the editing room for my new production, and I'm fine after a long day of working.
Yeah, that's the thing when you have a film, because Rabiye Kurnaz'ı versus Georgia Bush, it was premiered this year in February at the Berlinale, and it had a very successful festival run. On one hand, you have to promote this film, but also you're working on new projects. This is the dilemma of filmmakers, I think, usually, that you have to divide your time between the ongoing projects and the finished ones.
Yes, that's always the same thing, because if you publish a film, then sometimes it's after half a year or 1 year later after finishing the production. So of course I have to go on. I want to work, and so it's often that way that I'm already working on something new.
And the film is going to be released on Mubi very soon, and this is why we're having this conversation. And the first thing that I would like to ask is, I mean, the film is, of course, based on a real story and real characters. And I know that you've been working on this project for a very long time. Yeah. Do you remember when and where you first heard of Murat Kurnaz and his case? And what was your first reaction when you heard about this story?
So I heard about that, I think, from the news and television, because it was a very famous case in Germany, and Murat Kurnaz was the first and only guy from Germany who was imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay, and so I became immediately interested in that, because it was a very political and often discussed case, and more and more it came out that he was in Guantanamo for 5 years without any reason when he became free, and so I got interested in that, and then I read a book he wrote after, I think, 1.5 years after they set him free. And so I read this book. It was called 5 Years of My Life, and it touched me in a very strong way, because I had immediately the feeling that this is so unbelievable what happened to this innocent young guy. Yeah, and so I started meeting him. I went to Bremen, where he still lives until now, and I met him often. And of course, the first intention was to tell his story, and the story how it was to get into that strange and horrible situation, and we wanted to tell the story from his point of view, but more and more to develop a script after that story became more and more difficult to me, because I live in Germany, and it's difficult to get a kind of impression how it could be in Guantanamo. It's such a crazy thing, and all these horrible experiences of Murat, including torture and all these for 5 years. So it became more and more difficult for me and some different writers. I had, I think, 4 writers, and we tried to figure out that story, and it became more and more difficult. And then I met Murat's mother, Rabiye. We had dinner together in Bremen, together with Murat, and I immediately fell in love with her, because she's such a strong and powerful and hopeful woman. Yeah, and she is unbelievable, and she's full of humor. And so when I went home this evening by train to Berlin, I got the idea maybe it's more interesting to change the point of view of the storytelling. And so we changed the whole story, and it became like it is now, the story of Murat's mother and of Bernhard Dockel, her lawyer, and the two of them are fighting to set Murat free. And of course, this is also more my point of view on that kind of story. Yeah.
I would like to ask more about the characters, but Another thing I would like to know is, I mean, we see in your film how mainstream media in Germany first approached Murat's case. And it was very difficult and very delicate after September 11th, of course. But how were the reaction among the intellectuals or artists on that subject or topic? Do you remember exchanging any ideas with other intellectuals, filmmakers? And there were 2 other films, as far as I remember, about Murat before.
Yeah. So do you mean the reaction during the time Murat was in Guantanamo?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, during the time he was in country.
To be honest, we got not enough information about that case. It seemed to be a little bit strange, and I think most of the people did not really knew what happened there. So is that guy innocent? Maybe had he a kind of connection to Al-Qaeda or something? You did not knew, because he was also, Bremen is not far away from Hamburg, where some of the people from 9/11 came from. So it seemed to be difficult to get the information. And so I think, if I remember, on my point of view, I would say I didn't mistrusted the media enough. So I believed in a way, and then more and more it became difficult, and I said, no, there must be something wrong. And then when he came out, then I had immediately the feeling, okay, there is something wrong. But during that time, there were not enough informations, and only rumors, and we wanted to bring that kind of lack of information also into our movie, of course, because as you can see, even his mother in our film now does not really know what happened with him, and what happened she knows, but why he went to Pakistan, and if he has a kind of connection to Taliban or something else, she did not know in the beginning. Then step by step, the truth comes out. So, and then you realize what really happened.
But on the other hand, as we see the film, the whole story from her point of view, and of course she has this mother instinct, and even though she doesn't know whether he was guilty or not, she wants to save his son,
of course,
her son. And that's also the point of view of the audience, of course. I mean, even though it's important what you said, maybe you didn't mistrust the media enough, but still we as the audience are empathizing with her, of course, and we want her to succeed. So this is an important, I mean, maybe her inclusion as the leading character, as the main character, and her point of view also made this possible.
I hope so, because and even the lawyer in the film, he said, even if he is guilty of having connection to Al-Qaeda, then they have to bring him no, I cannot find the English word. They have to bring him to court, and they have to imprison somebody for 5 years without any sentence. So he had no lawyer, he had no information at all. So this is unbelievable, and so our system of justice is also responsible for those who are guilty. So we are responsible for these people, and they need and have to have a legal sentence. And he had no sentence at all. He was imprisoned without any sentence for 5 years, and this is impossible. And this is, of course, in any way not fair. And for that reason, her fight is always the right fight, because if he is guilty, they should find it out, but not in that way. Yeah.
And this is also the reason why this subject, this topic, and your film is still interesting for human rights organizations, and it's still valid.
There are still people sitting in Guantanamo Bay until now. I think nearly 40. So that's unbelievable. And no one brought them to any legal court. Yeah.
And you told that also, I mean, from your point of view in Germany, you wouldn't be able to know what Murat has been through in Guantanamo and torture. And I remember, I mean, when your film was shown at the Istanbul Film Festival, it was the opening film, and it had a very, it was received very well. And I was also moderating the Q&A there after the first screening. And I remember someone in the audience had his reservations about the film and asked you whether it was the right approach to mix such a tragedy with comedy. I know your answer to that, but maybe it's also important to emphasize again, when you decided to make a dramedy, a film that has both comedy and drama, instead of a very heavy drama, very heavy subject matter.
So it was not the first intention to get that kind of aesthetic mixture. It came with a character, to be honest. It came with the character of Rabiye, because you cannot imagine her without humor, because she is full of energy and humor. And so with her in the leading part of the film, with her as the main character, the humor immediately stepped in, because in another way she is in a very nice way kind of naive. And this is interesting, because without that naive character, maybe it wouldn't have been possible to stand all these horrible events during this 5 years. Yeah, because if she would have knew before what will happen to her, maybe she wouldn't start her trip to set him free. But because she did not know, she just is a kind of mother. She wants to have her son back, and that's the start of her fight. And she does not ask about what will happen to me, and then we will see what's going on in the movie. But I think these two things which are connected to her character, the point that she's in a way naive, and the other thing that she has this big heart and she's full of humor, that brought another bright tone into the storytelling, I would say.
And you mentioned her naivety. I also had it in my notes that she's like a character that we would see maybe in a Frank Capra film. I mean, she's like this initially good person who will overcome with goodness in the end, and the kind of character that the audience trusts as well. I mean, maybe she's naive and she doesn't have any experience with politics or diplomacy, but she always finds a way to get through her message.
Yeah, I think because it's she opens her heart, and everybody during this 5 years she get in touch to was impressed by that matter of fact, and shows we have a very important scene in the center of our film where when Rabiye is in Washington and she's in the church, and there are victims of 9/11 and relatives of Guantanamo prisoners together, and she and they want her to hold a speech, and she and what we are showing is that she reaches the hearts of the people, because she speaks about what does all that mean to her as a mother. And I think this is something everybody can understand. It's much easier to understand the feeling of a mother who lost her son, which is imprisoned innocent in Guantanamo, than to imagine how it could be in Guantanamo itself. So and that was interesting to us, and the way her character acts is really helpful to get into the emotions of the story.
But I mean, when you have a character like Rabiye and rely most of the comedy also on her behavior, there is also the risk that she might come across as the butt of the joke. So when you were working with Layla Stieler, also for the script, how did you manage to keep a balance so the audience wouldn't be laughing at her, but maybe laughing with her instead?
So I really hope that we managed to laugh with her, with the character, because I would say the comedy elements in the movie are maybe I do not know, 20%, but more or less it is a very, very serious story, and there are many parts in the movie where our main character gets totally lost, and it's even for her as a strong and powerful person, it's nearly impossible to bear all that pain that comes to her, and so I think it is not any kind of balance, because there's a small part of humor in the movie, and the most part of it is more or less the bitter way of life in that time.
Mm-hmm. And Meltem Kaptan, who is portraying Rabiye, I mean, she is a stand-up comedian and she is an immediate star, of course. I mean, she won the acting prize at the Berlinale with her first leading role, and she went on to win other prizes. Now she is nominated for the European Film Award. How did you cast her? I mean, how did you find about her?
So then when we started the project and the filming of the project, I knew that the most difficult thing would be to find the actress for the main character. And so we invited a lot of Turkish, German-speaking actresses, and even from Istanbul or from Austria. So they came from different countries, and we invited them to Berlin. And I checked if they could find the balance for the character, and if they could fit into the character, which was not so easy, because as we already spoke about, there, on one hand, the character has to be in a way a little bit naive, but in a nice and gentle way, and on the other hand, she needs that powerful package of humor and strength, and then, of course, and this is very, very important, she has to be very sensitive, because there's a lot of pain she has to carry on her shoulders, and so and for me, when I discovered Meltem, she comes from Cologne in Germany. For me, from the beginning on, she seemed to have the right mixture of all of that. So, she's a person you want to embrace immediately when you meet her, and that was maybe the most important thing. I always have to fell in love with my main actresses, and so this happened with Meltem. Yeah.
And Alexander Scheer is portraying Bernhard Docke, and you worked with him in your previous film Gundermann as well. It was also based on a real story, and his physical resemblance to both of these characters, to both Gundermann and Bernhard Docke, is really interesting. And is that important for you when you're working with a real story or real characters? Is the authenticity, how real or close to reality the story and the actresses will be, is that important for you?
Sometimes not. In that case, I had two actors who are able to copy real characters, or to enter them, I would say. And if you meet Alexander in person, he's quite different from Gundermann or from Bernhard. He's a total different person, and but he has, as an actor, he's able to change even his whole physiognomy into the character's physiognomy. He's always doing a lot of researches, and you know, in film you have always these different kind of actors. Some of them are always staying like they are. For the classical faces, maybe Jean Gabin. Yeah? Jean Gabin is always Jean Gabin, but then you have some other actors who are changing, and you sometimes you do not know how they really look in reality. Yeah? And Alexander, in a way, is like an actor of that group, and Meltem as well. So she can copy dialects. She can copy like somebody is walking, moving, and all these things. And for me, sometimes this is interesting, because if you enter the real character, you you step into the storytelling, and this is the most. It's not important to look similar. I think it's more important to realize how this character thinks, how he is, how he steps into the reality of the story. This is the most important thing, and for that reason, I was so happy with Alexander and Meltem to have both of them in the movie. Yeah.
The last question I would like to ask is, I mean, since we mentioned Gunderman, most of your films, if not all of them, tell stories from the GDR or stories of people who used to live in GDR. And now, and this is also where you were born and raised and where you started making films. But with Rabiye Kurnaz versus George W. Bush, we are in Bavaria. And do you think it's different in your filmography, or do you think after this film you will change that route, or are you planning to tell stories about GDR again?
So in former years, I sometimes told stories which did not happen in East Germany, or where it was not so important if it is East Germany or somewhere else. And so, of course, for me as a filmmaker, it is always a great gift to enter the reality of other people. In that case, with that story, for me, it was wonderful to meet great persons like Murat or Rabiye or the whole family Kurnaz. These are wonderful people, and I'm befriended with them now. And I'm curious about how Turkish people in Bremen live, and it was nice to enter their reality, and for that reason, it depends on the story where it takes place, and it's not the most important thing for me that it is taking place in East Germany. And for me, it was nice to step into the Turkish community in Germany.
But regardless of where it takes place, I mean, Rabiye Kurnaz versus George W. Bush is essentially German story, which is very important about German politics as well, because, I mean, Angela Merkel, when she became the chancellor, it is also an important turning point in Murat's case and how it progressed. And I know that both Murat and Rabiye, they still thank Angela Merkel for her support and help. And interesting enough, your film came at a point where her 16-year-long, unusually long term ended. So maybe your film also marks a certain time, like a before and after Merkel's Germany. Would you say that?
Yeah, a little bit. It's interesting. It's of course it's accidentally, but it's an interesting matter of fact, and she was really helpful in Murat's case because, as you know, and when you see the film, you get the reality behind that German politics was not very helpful, and they were not brave enough to get Murat out of Guantanamo, even if the Americans said, okay, you can have him. He's innocent. So after 1.5 years, when Murat was sitting in Guantanamo, the Americans felt sure about that he is innocent, and they gave signals to the German politics, and they did nothing. So they said he has a Turkish passport. Of course he grew up in Germany, but the Turks are responsible for that. So, and that is unbelievable. And so Merkel did a good job when she came into office, and one of her first things was to go to George W. Bush and said, how can we get Murat free? And he said, oh, you can have him. Since already 3.5 years. So, and this is a question of, I would say, personal moral of a politician, and to look in a different way onto these well-known facts, to see what's behind that and to ask questions. And Angela Merkel did that. And the president of our country, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who was working in the for the former chancellor, he did nothing until now. He had no excuses for what he did during the time when Murat was sitting in Guantanamo. Until now, I cannot believe that. And so, for me, if you ask about the end of Angela Merkel's time, hopefully this is not the end of moral and politics.
Yes, and now when the film will be released on Mubi, of course, it will reach more audiences. I mean, so far it was shown at several festivals in Turkey and it was received well. And you said that it was very interesting for you to go and meet the Turkish community in Bremen. And now you will reach even more audiences through Mubi, and hopefully you will hear more from the Turkish audiences. So thanks a lot for your time. And thanks a lot for that.
But I was to be honest, I was very excited when we went to Istanbul in April to have the Turkish premiere there. And then I think I was altogether in 3 or 4 screenings, and all of them were packed. And the reactions of the audience was amazing, as they were in a way similar to the German audience's reactions. The people were laughing and crying, and this was a very interesting and nice mixture. And we had very interesting political discussions after the screenings. And so hopefully the film meets an interested Turkish audience. I would be happy.
Hopefully. Thanks a lot for your time and for the interview.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All the best.